The winter cold in Chicago was harsh that year, as usual. Elizabeth Collins gazed at the snow falling outside the emergency room window, waiting for the end of her 24-hour shift. In her hands was a coffee cup that had lost its warmth, and her tired eyes were reviewing patient charts that kept coming in. "Dr. Collins, there's a phone call for you. It's from your family." At the voice from the nurse's station, Elizabeth frowned slightly. Her family rarely called her at the hospital. "Elizabeth, are you listening?" Her sister Caroline's voice echoed through the receiver. "Remember my 50th birthday trip? To France, Elizabeth. I've confirmed all the reservations. I was worried you might cancel again using work as an excuse, so I made all the arrangements for you." Elizabeth put her hand to her forehead. She had completely forgotten about her sister's birthday trip. Caroline's voice had a mix of joy and triumph. "Of course I remember," Elizabeth replied calmly. "I'll arrange my schedule, don't worry. Don't cancel this time. George and Laura are looking forward to it too." Caroline's voice contained a warning. After hanging up, Elizabeth let out a deep sigh. How many years had it been since she'd gone on a family trip? As the chief of emergency at Chicago Memorial Hospital, her life was constantly dominated by patients and emergencies. That evening, when Elizabeth returned home, her husband George was watching television in the living room. He gave a slight wave when he noticed his wife had come home. "Caroline called you, didn't she?" Elizabeth said as she took off her coat. "Yes, she was very excited," George answered, but his eyes didn't leave the television. "You're definitely going this time, right?" "Of course." Elizabeth sat down beside her husband. "This time I'll make sure to take the time." George looked directly at her for the first time. Doubt flickered in his blue eyes. "Really? For the past 5 years, you've said the same thing, but in the end, the hospital always takes priority." Elizabeth started to object but swallowed her words. George wasn't wrong. Their relationship, now in its 25th year, appeared stable on the surface, but underneath ran irreparable cracks. Elizabeth had some doubts about how her husband spent his time during her absences. "Mom, you're home." Their daughter Laura, coming down the stairs, frowned slightly when she saw her mother. A shadow of constant disapproval toward her mother resided on her beautiful face. "Did you hear about the France trip?" Laura asked as she headed toward the kitchen. "Will you really come this time? Don't cancel at the last minute like you did for my high school graduation trip to Europe." Elizabeth closed her eyes. The memory from 10 years ago came back vividly. She couldn't forget the look of disappointment in Laura's eyes the day she canceled her daughter's graduation trip for an emergency surgery. "This time is different, Laura," she promised. "I'll definitely go." Laura shrugged with a look of disbelief. The following week, Elizabeth informed her colleagues at the hospital about her vacation plans. Many doctors couldn't hide their surprise. "Dr. Collins taking a vacation? Unbelievable," voices whispered in the hallway. At home, preparations for the France trip were in progress. Caroline called Elizabeth almost daily, enthusiastically talking about what clothes to bring and restaurant reservations in Paris. While going along with her sister's enthusiasm, Elizabeth didn't miss the competitiveness hidden in her voice. Since childhood, Caroline had been affected by Elizabeth's presence. When her sister was admitted to medical school at the top of her class, Caroline went to business school. When her sister got a job at a prestigious hospital, Caroline established a marketing company. On the surface she was successful, but in her own eyes, her life always seemed to be in her sister's shadow. The day before departure, Elizabeth finished her last surgery. As she was leaving the hospital, her cell phone rang. It was Laura. "Mom, don't be late tomorrow. The flight is at 2 p.m. "It's all right, I promise." Elizabeth looked up at the sky. The snow had stopped, and stars were shining. Could she repair the family bonds she had neglected for years during this upcoming family trip? And could she herself take off the armor of a patient's first that she had worn for years, and exist as a wife, as a mother, as a sister? Elizabeth headed home with that wish in her heart. The morning in Paris, France, was filled with a different light than Chicago. Elizabeth had woken up early and was gazing at the Eiffel Tower visible from the hotel window. After 3 days of sightseeing in Paris, they were scheduled to move to a small village in the Burgundy region, Saint-Martin-de-la-Mer. The phone in the room rang, and Elizabeth instinctively tensed up. Was it a call from Chicago? She had clearly indicated she was on vacation, but sometimes there were calls about critical patients. Hello? Dr. Collins, I'm sorry, it was a young doctor's voice. I wanted to consult with you about Mrs. Johnson. Elizabeth looked at the clock. They had 30 minutes until breakfast with the family. Is it urgent? Yes, I'd like your judgment on the heart valve surgery. Elizabeth began giving detailed instructions over the phone while looking out the window. Her mind had completely switched to doctor mode. 30 minutes later, she went down to the hotel restaurant. George, Laura, and Caroline were already seated at the table. Good morning, Elizabeth greeted cheerfully. What a lovely morning. No response. All three were staring at her. Another call from Chicago? Caroline asked coldly. Elizabeth was surprised. How did you know? The walls are thin, sister, Caroline said as she put sugar in her tea. Even on my important birthday trip, you still can't get away from work. It was an urgent consultation, Elizabeth defended herself. It was a matter of life and death for the patient. You always say that, Laura interjected. When I was 10, when I was 16, at my graduation. Laura, that's different. How is it different? Laura's voice grew slightly louder. Since I was a child, you've always prioritized patients over us. I do a job that saves lives. I have to respond to emergencies. We're an emergency too, Caroline interrupted. Your family relationships are on the verge of collapse, but you don't notice. Elizabeth was at a loss for words. George remained silent, staring at the menu. George, aren't you going to say anything? Elizabeth appealed to her husband for help. George slowly raised his face. Lizzie, you're a wonderful doctor. Everyone acknowledges that. But as a wife, as a mother. He trailed off. Breakfast proceeded in a heavy atmosphere. Elizabeth tried to start conversations several times, but she received only short replies. After checking out, the group headed to Burgundy by train. The French countryside visible from the train window was beautiful, but Elizabeth's heart was sinking. They arrived at Saint-Martin-de-la-Mer late in the afternoon. Flowers were blooming profusely at the small stone station. The village was on a hill, surrounded by vineyards. What a lovely place, Elizabeth said, genuinely moved. This village is famous for the 3-star restaurant, Le Coeur de la Mer, Caroline explained. That's where we'll have my birthday dinner tomorrow night. Of course, only if you're not answering work calls. Elizabeth was about to argue when her cell phone rang. The screen displayed the number of Chicago Memorial Hospital. The entire family turned toward the ringtone. Don't answer it, Laura pleaded. Elizabeth hesitated for a moment. But professional ethics won. I'll make it quick. When she answered the phone, it was about a consultation for a patient with a severe traffic accident. Elizabeth moved to a slightly distant location and began giving detailed instructions on procedures. During that time, Caroline had completed the hotel check-in. We're going to the winery first, she told Elizabeth coldly. You can join us when you're done. When Elizabeth finished the call and returned to the hotel lobby, her family was gone. She got directions to the famous village winery from the front desk and hurried there. At the winery, a guided tour had already begun. Elizabeth found her family and quietly approached them. George gave a small nod when he noticed her, but Caroline and Laura ignored her. Do you have any questions about the Beaujolais brewing method? The guide asked. Just as Caroline was about to raise her hand, Elizabeth's phone rang again. The ringtone echoed in the quiet cellar of the winery, and all participants looked at her. Elizabeth hurriedly silenced her phone and waved apologetically to the guide. She quickly left the cellar and answered the call outside. This will be the last time I'll tolerate this. When Elizabeth returned, the tour had already moved to the next location. As she was looking for her family, she heard Caroline's voice in a separate room. Elizabeth stopped walking. It's time to teach Elizabeth a lesson, Caroline was saying. She always prioritizes patience over us. We need to give her a little dose of reality. But to leave Mom behind. There was hesitation in Laura's voice. It's just temporary. Just giving her time to think about what's important to her. Are you serious? It was George's voice. George, you've been troubled by her too, haven't you? Always work, work. It's time to make her face us. After a silence, George's voice was heard. Well, giving her a little shock might not be a bad idea. Elizabeth froze. She leaned against the wall and continued to listen to the family conversation. What were they planning? That night, during dinner at the hotel restaurant, Elizabeth apologized to her family. Everyone, listen. From tomorrow, I'll turn off my phone. Really? I don't want to ruin Caroline's birthday. Caroline smiled, but her eyes remained cold. Thank you, sister. Tomorrow will be a special day. It will surely be a day you won't forget. Laura and George exchanged glances, suggesting they were plotting something. Elizabeth didn't notice the change. Her mind was filled with plans for tomorrow's sightseeing. Finally, Caroline's birthday. She had bought a beautiful scarf for her sister in Paris. Tomorrow, she was firmly determined to cherish the time with her family. Morning light filtered through the lace curtains into Elizabeth's room. She was an early riser and had already showered, fixed her hair, and prepared her light travel outfit. Today was Caroline's 50th birthday. They had plans to tour wine cellars around the village and visit historic mansions. In the evening, there was a special dinner at the 3-star restaurant they had reserved. Elizabeth checked her bag. Her sister's present, wallet, cell phone, and passport. When traveling, she always carried her passport. However, the side pocket where she usually kept it was empty. That's strange. She emptied her bag, but the passport was nowhere to be found. She checked the table, dresser, bedside table. She searched the entire room, but it was nowhere. Calm down, Elizabeth. Try to remember where you put it last night. She closed her eyes and traced her memory. She was sure she had put it in her bag's pocket. Had someone stolen it? No, that couldn't be. Her family would have no reason to touch her passport. Looking at the clock, she saw there were only 15 minutes left until the meeting time. Elizabeth frantically searched her suitcase one last time, but still couldn't find it. With no other choice, she headed to the hotel lobby. The entire family was already gathered in the lobby. Caroline was wearing a bright yellow dress, full of birthday celebration atmosphere. George was in a sporty jacket, and Laura was wearing stylish sunglasses. All three had travel bags. Good morning, Elizabeth greeted, slightly out of breath. Everyone, I have a problem. I can't find my passport. A moment of silence. Looking for something? Caroline grinned. You mean this? She took out Elizabeth's passport from her handbag. Elizabeth's eyes widened. Why do you have it? I just kept it safe, Caroline said lightly, but her eyes glinted coldly. If you want it back, you'll have to apologize first. Apologize? For what? For treating my life as second place, Caroline's voice sharpened. You're always focused on your work, your patience, your success. I'm always in your shadow. Today is my birthday, but you were on the phone again yesterday. Elizabeth was confused. Caroline, stealing your passport is a crime. Stop joking and give it back to me. She reached for the passport, but Caroline quickly pulled away. Laura stepped forward. Mom, you always put patience before me, her voice was cold. Always, since I was little. My presentations, my games, my graduation, you always left in the middle. Don't you need some time alone to think? Elizabeth stared at her daughter in bewilderment. Laura, you too. Lizzie, George quietly began. You always choose work over family. Always emergency calls, always on standby. In 25 years of marriage, you've barely been home half the time. You need some time apart to think. Elizabeth was hit with a mix of anger and fear. Are you joking? Give me back my passport right now. Her voice rose. The hotel front desk staff looked at them anxiously. Caroline smiled politely and said in French, just a small family dispute. No need to worry. Let's see what happens if we leave her here, Caroline said. She'll figure it out. George and Laura looked at each other, laughing and nodding. No, I won't let you do this. Elizabeth shouted. This is kidnapping. Give me back my passport. Caroline replied calmly, kidnapping? You're an adult. You'll just spend some time alone in the village. It will be time to think about what's more important, family or work. Please, stop, Elizabeth's voice trembled. Caroline, I don't want to ruin your birthday. I promise, I won't answer the phone anymore. It's too late, Caroline put the passport in her bag. You'll have to reflect for at least today. George placed his hand on his wife's shoulder. Lizzie, don't worry. We'll be back tomorrow. As Caroline says, just some time to think. Elizabeth pushed her husband away. I can't believe it. You're also participating in this plan? While she was protesting, Caroline and Laura were already carrying their luggage toward the hotel exit. Elizabeth hurriedly chased after them. Wait. Please, this is wrong. Outside, a taxi was already waiting. George said something in French to the driver and began putting luggage in the trunk. Elizabeth clung to Laura. Laura, please. I'm your mother. Don't do this. Laura hesitated for a moment, but noticing Caroline's cold gaze, said, I'm sorry, Mom. This is for your own good, and got into the car. I'm sorry, ma'am, the driver said to Elizabeth. He didn't seem to understand what was happening. As Elizabeth was about to protest again, George grabbed her hand. Lizzie, calm down. We'll be back tomorrow. The hotel room is paid for. Enjoy the village. Why are you doing this? Tears welled up in her eyes. To make you feel what you've always made us feel, he answered quietly. The feeling of being left behind. George got into the taxi, and the door closed. Elizabeth panicked and knocked on the window. But the taxi had already started moving, driving away toward the station on the village's cobblestone road. Elizabeth stood there stunned. Without her passport or sufficient cash, she was stranded in a small foreign village. She took out her cell phone and called George, but the call just kept ringing. She also sent messages to Caroline and Laura, but they weren't read. Now, what do I do? Elizabeth took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. As an emergency doctor, she had dealt with crisis situations every day. I'll have to handle this as another emergency. First priority was to seek help. She returned to the hotel and explained the situation to the young woman at the front desk. The woman listened sympathetically, but when she asked, "Would you like to file a police report?" Elizabeth hesitated. Should she report her family as criminals? She decided to call the American embassy. However, the embassy official told her, since it's the weekend, we can't start emergency passport issuance procedures until Monday. Today was Saturday. She would be stranded in this village for at least 2 days. Elizabeth sat down in a chair and covered her face with her hands. The choices she had made throughout her life were racing through her mind like a film reel. Her career as a doctor, which she had pursued at the expense of her family. The numerous family anniversaries she had missed to save patients. Had she really made the wrong choices? Sitting on the cafe terrace, overwhelmed with a sense of despair, Elizabeth stared at her cell phone. It was the only link between her and Chicago, symbolizing her identity. As Dr. Elizabeth Collins, she had continued to save lives through that phone. But now, she couldn't use that phone to save anyone's life. She was being questioned about her worth as a woman, as a mother. The village of St. Martin de la Mer showed a unique liveliness on Sunday afternoon. Locals had finished church mass and were beginning to gather in the village square. Elizabeth sat alone on the cafe terrace, watching the village scene with an espresso in front of her. A day had passed since her family had left. There was still no contact on her cell phone, and her messages remained unread. Anger and sadness alternately assaulted her, but a feeling close to resignation was predominant. One more day until Monday. Once the embassy opened, she could start the emergency passport issuance procedure. "Would you like a refill on your coffee?" a young waitress asked. Just as Elizabeth was about to answer, noisy voices rose from across the square. People were moving hastily, and someone shouted, "Hurry! Call a doctor! Doctor!" The moment that word reached her ears, Elizabeth's body moved reflexively. She left the table and ran toward the crowd. "I'm a doctor," Elizabeth shouted in French. As people made way, she saw an elderly man collapsed on the ground. He was clutching his chest in pain, and his face was pale. Elizabeth quickly knelt beside the man and checked his pulse. Weak and irregular. She loosened the man's tie and unbuttoned his shirt. This could be a heart attack. "Please call an ambulance," she said in English to the surrounding people, but no one moved. "Ambulance! Hurry!" A young man took out his cell phone and called the emergency number. Elizabeth positioned the man on his side and secured his airway. But suddenly, the man stopped breathing. Cardiac arrest, Elizabeth began chest compressions. "Does anyone know how to do artificial respiration?" No one stepped forward. Elizabeth continued cardiac massage alone, periodically performing artificial respiration as well. As time passed, sweat appeared on her forehead, and her arms grew tired, but she never stopped. "How many more minutes until the ambulance arrives?" she asked. "About 15 minutes, the young man answered. "We're a bit far from the village center." 15 minutes was too long. Elizabeth gritted her teeth. Is there an AED, a defibrillator? But there would be no such medical equipment in the village square. She silently continued CPR. More than 10 villagers had gathered around, watching her desperate efforts. "Please, don't die," Elizabeth spoke to the patient. "You must still have things to do." When the ambulance siren began to be heard, the man's pulse returned. Weak, but a definite heartbeat. Elizabeth let out a deep sigh of relief. As paramedics arrived and placed the man on a stretcher, an elderly woman grasped Elizabeth's hand. "Thank you. He is my husband," gratitude tears shone in her eyes. As the man was being carried into the ambulance, villagers applauded Elizabeth. She was exhausted but felt a quiet satisfaction at having fulfilled her duty as a doctor. "Who is that man?" Elizabeth asked the elderly woman. "Pierre Dubois. He is the most famous chef in this village. The owner of Au Cœur de la Mer. That 3-star restaurant. The place Caroline had reserved." Elizabeth nodded slightly. "Will he be all right?" "His life was saved thanks to you. But please, would you come to the hospital with us?" Elizabeth nodded without hesitation. In a strange land, with language barriers, she had no other choice. Her instinct as a doctor was guiding her again. During Pierre's treatment at the regional hospital, Elizabeth waited in the lobby with Pierre's wife Marie. The test results showed he had suffered a myocardial infarction, but thanks to early intervention, he had avoided serious damage. "Without you, my husband would not have survived," Marie said tearfully. "You are an angel." Elizabeth smiled. "I just did what any doctor would do." "You've come from America. Are you here as a tourist?" After hesitating, Elizabeth decided to tell her everything. The family trip, having her passport taken, being left in the village. Marie's expression changed to anger. "What a shameful act. We must help the person who saved my husband's life." That night, Marie proposed that Elizabeth stay in a guest room above Pierre's restaurant. "Tomorrow, I'll also help you contact the American embassy. My nephew is a lawyer in Paris. He will help you." Elizabeth was filled with gratitude. It was an unexpected turn of events, but she felt secure for the first time. By fulfilling her role as a doctor, other people were now helping her. The next day, Pierre was discharged from the hospital. His recovery was remarkably good, surprising even the doctors. That afternoon, despite his weak condition, he strongly wished to participate in the special recording of the popular TV program La Cuisine Française, which had been scheduled a week in advance. "This program is an important opportunity to introduce my husband's new menu," Marie explained. Elizabeth tried to stop Pierre, but his determination was firm. "I'm fine, doctor. And I want you to come with me." "Me? But why?" "I want to tell your story to all of France, no, to the whole world." In a Paris hotel room, the three, Caroline, Laura, and George, turned on the TV while having room service dinner. They hadn't mentioned a word about Elizabeth, but anxiety swirled in each of their hearts. "Tomorrow, let's go back to St. Martin to pick her up," George said. "She should have learned her lesson by now." Yes, Caroline agreed on the surface, but inwardly she wanted her sister to suffer longer. Laura remained silent and changed the channel. La Cuisine Française was starting. "Before introducing my new recipe," Pierre Dubois on the screen said, "I would first like to introduce the person who saved my life." The camera panned to show Elizabeth. The early summer sunlight in Paris streamed through the windows of Le Coeur de la Mer Paris. Just 1 month after opening, this restaurant had already become the most difficult reservation to get in Paris. The innovative menu based on the concept of medical food harmony had become a topic of conversation among gourmets. Elizabeth came out of the kitchen and surveyed the full dining room. The healing cuisine she had conceived fused traditional French cooking methods with the latest nutritional science. Her partnership with Pierre had brought an unexpected turn to her life. That day, the TV interview changed her life. As she answered the host's questions and told the story of being abandoned by her family, voices of anger rose in the studio. The program was broadcast throughout France and quickly became international news. Along with her passport photo, pictures of Caroline, George, and Laura were shown on screen, and the host stated, "Family abandonment is a criminal act." The next morning, journalists flocked to the hotel, forcing the three to barricade themselves in their room. The American embassy also contacted them, warning about the possibility of family desertion charges. On social media, the hashtag #FamilyBetrayal spread, and their faces became known worldwide. "Elizabeth, are you ready for the TV recording at 3 p.m.? Pierre interrupted her thoughts. He had fully recovered and was more energetic than before. "Yes, I'm ready," she smiled. Her cookbook, Dr. Elizabeth's Healing Cuisine, was already generating significant buzz before publication. Elizabeth was uncertain whether she should return to America, but the Chicago hospital had granted her a special 1-year leave to support her research in the fusion of medicine and cuisine. Her cell phone rang. "Elizabeth?" George's voice sounded smaller than before. "How are you doing?" "Surprisingly fulfilling," she answered honestly. She remembered the day 3 months ago when her family came to apologize. Unable to endure the media onslaught, they had come to St. Martin with their heads bowed. Caroline had been fired from her company, Laura had been ostracized by her friends, and George's mistress had abandoned him. Elizabeth forgave them. However, they didn't return to their original relationship. "I've found a new path," she told them. "My mission to heal people hasn't changed, just the method is different." "Do you plan to come back?" Hope mixed in George's voice. "I'll return occasionally. But I also have a place here." After hanging up, Elizabeth went out to the terrace. The Paris cityscape spread before her. She took a deep breath. At 54, having reached an unexpected turning point in life, she felt complete satisfaction with her own choices for the first time. True family isn't about blood ties, but about people who cherish you. Murmuring this, she returned to the restaurant. Pierre and the staff welcomed her with warm smiles. Here, she had a new family who needed her and recognized her value.